getting nervous.
Okay. We'll just give a minute or so for everybody to get on and...
Hello, hiya.
Hello.
So as per usual, if you mute your microphones, and then what we'll do is you can either put stuff in the chat that you pick up at the end, or have questions, or have a think about what questions you'd like to ask Lauren at the end. Kim will facilitate, host the meeting, and I will be in the background just admitting background people coming in at the last minute.
Okay. So is everybody muted? I might have one person still. John, can you just make sure you're muted? Can you do a mute all, Alan? And then I'll unmute myself. Okay, I think that's a bit better now. So thanks everybody for coming. And I would just like to introduce Lauren to you today. So Lauren, is it fair to say you were a trainee? What year would that have been for the Outlander training programme?
2017.
And that was for the season 4 filming that was going on. And you, what department you were under? Was it production primarily? You were a production trainee?
Yeah, primarily a production trainee, and then with the traineeship I did have like 2 days to kind of go and explore other departments, but yeah, primarily production.
So before we dive into what being a production trainee is, could you just give us a insight into what your journey was leading up to applying for and being accepted to the Outlander training programme, please?
Yeah, so I actually didn't have a background in film and TV. I studied languages at university, interpreting and translating at Heriot-Watt, and still very much would like to work with my languages at some point in the future, but I knew that interpreting and translating wasn't really for me. So kind of from my final year at university, I started to look for different career paths, and my cousin is actually in the camera department, so I'd always kind of heard that he was sort of my introduction to the world of film and TV as a career path, because for me personally, I went to a school that didn't really not advertise creative roles like that, but I just didn't know that it could have been like a career path for myself. So like speaking with him at like Christmas and different points of seeing him, and I was just intrigued really by this world. It's like what goes on here. So basically from about January of 2017, I was like, right, I'm actually very interested in kind of looking into the world of film and TV, but I need to be certain that, yeah, I could see myself working in this sort of realm. So I started going to open days. So like BBC do open days. And I mean, I know it's different now with coronavirus, so I'm sure they do like Zoom versions and kind of online seminars. But I was going to kind of open days at some local Glaswegian production companies, Channel 4. Then I found all of these on like Twitter, different social media sites. And then that was like 6 months really of getting myself sort of introduced to the world of TV and the different roles that would be available for someone like me that had zero experience, but was wanting to like find a route and find a foot in the door really. And then it's hard when I'm talking because it sounds like I went straight into the job, because I graduated in June and then I started at Outlander in August. So it sounds like, oh, I just like hung up my university shoes and then popped into Outlander and that was me. But actually I had been putting the graft in since sort of December, January of the start of that year. So, and I got loads of rejections and kind of gone to different interviews. But again, that kind of builds up your knowledge for your future, taking part in different interviews and traineeships and things. And then I came across Outlander, and I actually, because I'd applied to so many different traineeships, when I got the call about Outlander, which was about, I think it was July or August or something, I missed the call, and then I missed the call again. And then when I think if you guys are in Cumbernauld, you'll know, I think the studios used to be like a warehouse. Can't remember what it was, but when I typed it into,
it was a factory.
A factory, yeah. And that was the number that came up when I typed it in. So I was like, why are they calling me? So eventually got through to the office, and they said, oh, you've got an interview. So obviously I was very excited about that. So the interview process was the traineeship application. You kind of filled out all these questions, and the only requirement when I did the traineeship was you had to have a driving license. I'm not sure now what the requirements are. I think you might need to have, I mean, all of you on the course, you've got a background in film and TV just from doing the course, so I'm sure that's a requirement enough. So yeah, I went to the interview, which was with the production manager and the production coordinator on Outlander, and it was a very informal interview, which was nice. Just sort of a discussion. And one thing I would say is the thing that I think got me the job was I really kind of hounded because I didn't have a background in film and TV. I had to go with my transferable skills. So basically, I'd done interpreting and translating at uni, which involves like communication, research, sort of interpersonal skills, which are like very useful in a production office. So I was really saying, oh yeah, I'm really good at this, really good at that, blah, blah, blah. And also I'd put on my CV, just to sort of give me a connection to film and TV, I'd actually put the fact I'd attended these open days on my CV, which seems like a strange thing to do, but it was basically to show that I hadn't woken up one day and thought, ah yeah, film and TV, that's for me. That's easy, I'll just go and work in that sort of industry. So that did sort of demonstrate my desire to sort of actively pursue a career in film and TV.
Can I just ask, at the point when you applied and you went for the interview, did you know at that point it was a production department you were interested in, or was that some insight from the people who were interviewed could see that that's what you were looking for, or that's what
so I specifically applied to the production traineeship. It was between the locations traineeship and the production traineeship, which now with my knowledge of both, I'm like, they're completely different traineeships, but at the time I was like, oh, quite like locations. But I ended up going for production purely based on what I'd sort of learn about the industry and the production department from the open days I attended. So basically I went to sort of open days where they had the production team on like a wee stage, and they would talk about what their roles were, and then that was what kind of I grasped onto, and I was like, I can see myself in that sort of role. So it was a production traineeship specifically I applied to, and that's the way that Outlander traineeship works. I think you apply specifically to the role that you think best suits you, and they have a little description of what the role involve and maybe skills that would be useful to have. So yeah, and that was a very, very quick turnaround. I think I did the interview on the Tuesday. I got a call on the Wednesday to say that I had the job, and I started on the Monday. So luckily I'd obviously finished uni by this point, and I was working in a bar. It was like a bar agency, so you didn't have to give notice or anything. So I was like, bye, going to Outlander. So off I went, and yeah, I was basically in the deep end from day one. I actually hadn't driven in like 4 years because I'd been in Edinburgh, which I didn't really need a car for. Didn't have a car, and a big role of production runner, which I was trainee, but I was basically runner, is like you're in the car every day pretty much. I'm sure there are roles that are, I mean, Cumbernauld, the studio specifically, is because before I started I didn't have a car obviously, so I'd looked into bus routes, etc., and it's a hard place to get to without a car. So that for that job you would need a car, but I know people that have worked in TV as runners and trainees that have been like in a city centre or elsewhere. So it's definitely not, if you don't have a driving license, it's not a requirement. It is very useful to have, but I'm sure there's jobs available where you don't need one. But yeah, day one, I was basically had to drive from Cumbernauld to the West End, and I literally hadn't driven in 4 years. I'd only been driving, my mum had an automatic at the time, and I think I'd driven it like twice in the 4 years. So I hadn't driven a manual in ages. And I think I was sat for like 5-10 minutes at the security gate because it was one of the new ones where you didn't actually put the key in the car. It was just had to be in the car. I couldn't find, it was, yeah, the security guard had a right laugh at me. So that was good. So yeah, I think that was one of the things I noticed first of all, was the perception of the world of film and TV as like glamorous. It's not. It's not glamorous. So yeah, that was interesting.
And when you went like zipping up and down in this car that you had, what other like kind of roles? What kind of other role did the trainee production involve?
So I have to say, my role specifically at Outlander, I was out of the production office quite a lot. Just given the nature of the show, especially when we were filming, Outlander films sort of, when we're on location, we could be like up Calendar, like Stirlingshire, like all over the place. So I did spend a lot of time in the car, whether I was picking up cast members from the airport, dropping off kind of parcels or camera equipment around about Glasgow, collecting the rushes was my main, or not my main role, but maybe my most important, because obviously the rushes don't get to post-production, then they can't get edited, and that's a very important role. And basically, as soon as I had the rushes in my hand, didn't matter if I had anything else to do, I just had to get back to the studio as soon as possible. So that was quite exciting, like knowing that I had the power in my hands to take these rushes back to the studio. Not that I would run away with them or anything, but the fact that I could run away with them was quite good.
Big responsibility. You've got the whole show in your hands or in the back seat of your car.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of moving either people or equipment or data, moving things about. And what about the communication? You were talking about how communication's like so integral. Can you tell a bit about that side of it?
I mean, communication kind of ranges from everything between communicating with your team. I mean, the production team is very much a team. Your Outlander actually has quite a big production department compared to other. I've also worked in River City, which is a much smaller production team. There's only 4 of us there, whereas Outlander's close to 10, maybe more. So, and obviously each member of the production team is at a different level of, they're at a different level. So you have producers, you have production managers, you have kind of closer peers to you, like your production assistants, who've usually had a similar experience to yourself. This might be their first job in production assistant role, but their last job they were trainee, and you're very much looked after. It's kind of a team mentality. But then also when you can be one-on-one with people quite a lot, so picking up cast or picking up crew members. So that was quite daunting, first of all, because I don't know, you're just thinking, what am I supposed to talk to this person about, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, some of the conversations I've had, I actually picked up, because Billy Boyd was in season 5. Yeah, season 4? Season 4 and season 5. And when I picked him up, I had a bit of a stage fright as well. So I was like, oh my God, it's Billy Boyd. And I talked to him about Pakora. I don't know why. I mean, it was different. Like some conversations you get on to people is just so random because you're either nervous or you just, but it is really good because your communication skills just really jump up, because you're just, I think with production, there's so many different aspects you're just like thrown into the world of TV and film that you just need to like roll your sleeves up and get on with it. As well, my role, I got to know so many people because, as I said, I was on set all the time. I was sort of, I knew not everyone, but I knew pretty much every department, because I would be running about the studio, delivering parcels, or I did a very glamorous job of doing the ASDA order and then taking the Asda trolley around the studio, distributing all the food to everyone. So I was usually on a Tuesday and a Thursday, I was everyone's favourite person, especially the construction department would run after the tonics tea cakes that I was delivering. So
it's important. You need to fuel
yeah.
the production with sugar and caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just mentioned like the kind of the production office, and you talk about how there's the producer and there's a production manager, and I was just wondering if you, because you've worked on a couple of productions now, if you could just explain what their roles are a wee bit.
Yeah, so Outlander, I would say, I think I'm right in saying that your kind of core production team would be like runner, assistant or secretary, production manager, production coordinator, and like a producer, line producer, maybe like the kind of core crew. So on Outlander, we have a much bigger team. So you've got the trainee and you've got the runner, who their role is to sort of basically assist with, yes, they're at the bottom, I suppose, of the hierarchy of the office, but that doesn't diminish the responsibility that they have in the wider picture, as I said, about the rushes. And a lot of the time the runner is actually delivering equipment that is indispensable to the production. So if they weren't there, they wouldn't be able to get that sort of equipment to a certain location at a certain time. So the runner and I suppose the runner is sort of self-explanatory in that they are basically on the move all the time. I mean, I used to rack up like so many steps a day, which was good. Now I'm much more like sedentary on the seat, so I need to take time out of my day to actually force myself to exercise. But yeah, on the job I was doing a lot of steps a day. Then if you take a next step up, you've got the production assistants or the secretaries, who are much more kind of desk based, so they could deal with assisting the coordinator. Or in Outlander's situation, we have assistant coordinators for travel and one for accommodation. So the production assistants would assist those roles with kind of pickups for if the caution department need a courier for wigs, for costume and wigs and bits and bobs like that. They could do anything from that to actually finding accommodation for cast members, for crew, very like kind of logistics based things, and also answering the phones and making phone calls and setting up meetings for people. Then in Outlander
as well, travel like flights,
travel.
Stuff like that as well.
Yeah, flights. So we have, as I said, assistant coordinator for travel. So their sole job is basically to organise travel for the whole production. So that could range from a taxi from Glasgow Airport to Cumbernauld to the studio, to our writers flying over from Los Angeles, to we do have a driver's department on Outlander for when we're actually filming. So they sort of coordinate with the drivers as to, okay, who's getting which cast member this morning, and are we picking up other people on the way? With COVID, I think that's now going to affect that department quite a lot, because with car sharing and things, so it's also like a role where you're always having to adapt to what's going on in the environment. And similarly, the accommodation assistant coordinator, they will solely deal with accommodation. And I think when like most seasons we could have up to 40 properties. That's for cast or crew, and that's like apartments or flats. And then on top of that, you've got the moving shooting unit. So if we're filming up in, I don't know, Inverness or something, that you need to make sure you've got a bed and breakfast for the entire shooting crew, which is exciting. I mean, one of the things I had to do when I was runner was drive up to, it's like a 2.5 hour drive to where we filmed the stones in Outlander, which are not actually there, by the way. And a lot of tourists come over here trying to find the stones, but they're not. They're a prop. So yeah, it's a 2.5-hour drive, and had to drive around kind of caravan sites. This had all been arranged by the accommodation coordinator, caravan sites and hotels and stuff, picking up keys to then bring back to the studio and hand out the keys. So it would kind of make it more streamlined, so that we didn't have a massive queue of Outlander crew kind of queuing up at 9 o'clock at night after they'd filmed a full day. So yeah, it's things like that. The production office, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, aims to make everyone else's life a bit easier, I suppose. which usually means if you're in production, your life's a wee bit harder.
It's like
But
keep everything flowing, isn't it? And
yeah,
make sure it's like logistical and problem solving exercises and
yeah,
and then who would be at the top of the tier, and like production manager and
yeah,
producer, what would their roles be then?
yeah. So you've then got we have a production coordinator who I would say runs the production office, as in they sort of delegate the tasks for the core production team below them. They would then answer to the production manager, who is sort of in charge of all the logistical aspects of a production, and they sort of work with all the kind of HODs and different departments to kind of ensure that everything runs smoothly on the production. And if the camera department needs specific cameras, or if costume needs specific things, then they would come to the production manager, and then they would then speak with the producer, who's like at the top, with all things to do with the budget. Production manager, I think, also like employ staff and crew and send out contracts, and also deal with kind of the law, like the legalities of things, and
Health and safety and everything.
yeah, health and safety. So yeah,
it's a big job being a production manager, and I think like
Mhm.
production managers are kind of like, having a good production manager creates good quality work. I mean, any production managers I've worked with, it's like they just seem to be like kind of oracles they just know so much of every department, and and also they're creative people at the same time, and they're people that never really say no. They just kind of problem solve and work out how things are going to get done. That's my experience anyway.
No, definitely. I definitely have the same experience. I definitely think, as you say, a good production manager is like night and day between how the production office will be run. If it's run well from the top, then it will be run well from the bottom, sort of thing. So, and also being, I think as well with production, knowing that, and this was one thing for me before I did my interview, I went on IMDb and went and saw what the production manager and coordinator had kind of done before. And I saw that they'd both started as runners on film or TV. And I think that sort of settled my nerves a wee bit, because I knew that they had been in the same circumstances that I was putting myself into. And I think as well, it's really noticeable, people that have worked within the roles that you've worked in, whether they're now the showrunner or now the exec producer or the producer, like it's so obvious who has been in your shoes. And I think it makes them a bit better at their now higher up role.
Do you think they've got more empathy for you then when you're running about?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I mean, tensions get high, especially when filming. That was kind of because obviously when I joined, we had, I think that year we were filming, so I joined in August, and I think we started filming in March or April. So I had like a good few months of solely prep, which is a completely different time for the production office, especially because you kind of, I wouldn't say it's easy ozy, it's not, but it's just kind of like, right, we've just got our job to do right now in the production office. We know what we're doing. Not many spanners can get thrown in the works right now. Definitely some spanners, but not the carnage of when shooting actually begins. So that was quite good being brought in at the time before we started filming. And then obviously when we did start filming, that was another completely new world for me, because I'd never been on a film set before. And to be on like a high-end drama film set was even more completely baffling to me, sort of looking about. And I mean, the set design on Outlander is next to amazing. So, but actually getting to being on the actual set and realizing, because tensions are so high and people have a job to do, like you will get shouted at, but it's not actually directed at you. It's basically sort of the first assistant director, for example, will have like a job to do, and if people are getting in the way, it's not personal, I suppose. It's a good thing to keep in mind when you're on a film set.
Yeah. I mean, tensions, like you said, people are stressed, they're very focused, but they still shouldn't, people still need to be courteous. People shouldn't be bullying or being, rude, but you need to give it's a high pressure situation, basically. And it only lasts for a certain amount of time, and then it's kind of coming in waves that everybody would be under, and they would be filming and under that amount of pressure. And is there anything else you'd want to talk about with just like anything that you feel the students or anybody who's not worked in production should really know about the production office that you've not already mentioned or anything like that?
Yeah, I think, I suppose for myself, my experience anyway, before I joined Outlander, as I said, I didn't actually have prior experience in film and television. So really the industry as a whole, I was kind of going in blind, I suppose, not really knowing what any department fully did. But I think now, from working in production, I'm so happy that it was production I chose. I think I could have easily, as I said, I was kind of between locations and production. Obviously, a lot of the traineeships require a specific skill. So like if you're joining the art department, usually you'll have an art kind of background behind you. If you're joining costume, the same. You've maybe studied at university fashion and textiles, or like post-production. I don't think you necessarily need a background, but usually people will either in their spare time they're kind of editing bits and bobs, or they've, like yourselves, have done a film and television course or been at college. So I'm kind of happy I stumbled into production and found myself there, purely because, so now the role I'm in, so I basically started as production trainee on season 4, did a wee stint on River City, and then came back for season 5 as sort of interim runner. And then I was the script production assistant, which was basically production assistant, so doing the usual, what I said earlier, answering phones, arranging travel and pickups for different bits and bobs, and also printing scripts and assisting with printing scripts, which is a massive job, especially for a production like Outlander. So that would basically involve knowing sort of everyone's preferred way to receive their script, which could either be A5, A4, double-sided, single-sided, and then printing out however many copies for different people, and then amendments coming in, knowing what pages to print, whether you needed to print the full script or not. And then after I did script production assistant, the role I'm currently in now is assistant to the showrunner on Outlander, so which is a kind of dream come true role, I suppose. So I'm basically now in the sort of, I'm the kind of go between the logistics and creative side of the show, which is perfect for me. So now that I'm in the sort of creative room and I'm seeing the scripts before they're released and how they're kind of become the documents that they do become, I now see, I can pinpoint exactly what production are going to say, we can't do that, we can do that, before because a lot of the writers on the show don't necessarily come from a production background, so they might, and I've been in rooms where they've said, oh, but we could do this, but we could do that, and the production officer like, well, one, we can't afford that, or we just feasibly can't do that. So a lot of writers sort of disheartened by that, but with the knowledge I have, I know that if I did go on to write anything, I would kind of keep that in mind going forward, which is definitely useful as well from a perspective of, if you get something in your head and you really, really want to do it, but then telling yourself that, okay, I know I can't do that, I'll have to take that out of my script before I get my heart shattered by producer.
Is writing the route that you want to pursue now after having lots of experience being in?
I think producing and writing, so like the showrunner, basically my boss's job, he basically has overall creative and sort of managerial authority over the entire show of Outlander. So anything has to come back through him, whether that be which directors we're employing, the sort of main storylines for this season, the actors that we're going to have, the casting process. But he also writes for the show, so he's very much in both realms, whereas we have other executive producers that their sole job is the sort of overall overseeing of the show from a producer perspective. So we have producers that deal with the logistics of the show, which is the producers we have in Cumbernauld, who basically oversee the budget and the management of the show, and they will be on set sort of managing from this side of the pond,
like
and then
scheduling and stuff like that. They would
scheduling. And basically they work out whether we feasibly can do things, whether that is relying on the budget or relying on what we have available to us in terms of visual effects, special effects, things like that. And then in America we also have our network, Sony and Stars, who they'll kind of muscle in on, they'll give notes to the writers and the executive producers on what they would like to see from the show, and if things need change. And then we have our executive producers in Los Angeles, who their role is to basically make sure we're staying true to, because Outlander's adapted from books, staying kind of on track with the books. If we are changing storylines, it's not too far, it's believable for our characters to do certain things, but they don't actually write on the show, so they're kind of involved in the casting process, all aspects basically of the creative process other than writing. And I don't know if that's specific to America, because obviously
just about to ask that, because I mean I probably sound naive asking this question, but the showrunner kind of model, that's quite an American model, is it, where the showrunner runs the show? And I was saying earlier, like maybe a more British model would be that the writer has the vision, but so maybe you can give me one more insight in that, because I'm quite naive to.
I mean, so my background is obviously mostly with Outlander, which is an American, it's Stars is the network, so they do like Power and Black Sails and I think a few other shows. So I remember learning when I first got into TV, the difference between film and TV is in film, the director is basically the head honcho and they have the final say in everything, whereas in TV, in America anyway, the showrunner has like final say. So like your Shonda Rhimes or Ryan Murphy or different folk, they would be the kind of people that in charge. So Matt, my boss, he's that for Outlander. I think as well in Outlander we have a writer's room, which I think is quite an American thing. I think I know like Sex Education and different shows that are kind of new shows, I think they're starting to bring this concept to the UK. But as far as I'm aware, on River City we did have a writer's room, but that's obviously a completely different type of show, like your kind of soap type show.
That's multiple writers literally in a room brainstorming about what the story's going to be, a bit of dramaturgy between each other. And
and with my new role, and actually I suppose with COVID I've actually been on like the Zoom room, I suppose it's
Zoom writers room.
So obviously they would usually be doing that, and with the time difference it's quite difficult because I think we're 8 hours ahead of Los Angeles, so usually I think I was on a call till like 1 o'clock in the morning the other week, so obviously didn't start my day until later in the day, but that's been really interesting, being actually able to see how I'm usually in. Another good thing about being in production is you sort of are able to see what all the different roles within the entire production involve. So in my new role of assistant to the showrunner, I am in a lot of important meetings, but I'm not taking part in the meetings, but I'm just like it's basically being a fly on the wall, which is always what you really want to be anyway. So that in itself is a complete learning process.
Yeah. Well, in education, you'd be able to bear witness to all these decisions being made.
Yeah. And from having the production knowledge that I have, it makes sense. So I know why decisions are being made, because I now have been involved in a production office and can see where decisions have come from, and I'm not sort of confused as to why they can't do that or why they can do that. So that's really useful. And then but yeah, the American model, as you were saying, I think the showrunner is quite a Americanization, I suppose, Americanism.
So that's not to get confused with being a production runner, because that's the person running about at the bottom. A showrunner, I suppose, is literally the person running the show.
Yeah, I suppose it's basically both, like one end of the spectrum and the other, basically.
Don't get the two runners mixed up there, because there's a world of difference.
Yeah.
I just have kind of one more question that I'd like to ask you, if you're willing to divulge. But you said that you're going to go in and write your own stuff. So what kind of stuff is it you're interested in writing, and what do you envision ultimately for the future?
I'm not sure, actually. I think obviously Outlander is, my boss always shouts at me for saying it's not a fantasy show. It's like there's so many different aspects to Outlander, because it's obviously, well, first of all, it's based on books, so it's an adaptation. So that in itself is a massive undertaking. And it's like shows like Game of Thrones. You basically, from the writers will basically work out the tentpole moments of the book, and then once they've got those moments, then they kind of magnify it down to, okay, what do we need to bring that story to life, and what do we need to change to tell it in a different medium. So obviously, instead of reading the story, you're now going to be bringing it to life. And obviously, I'm sure people will know that you can't always portray things that are portrayed well in a book, don't automatically come onto screen very well. So that's a process in itself. So I think I would definitely like to, because I've seen the adaptation process, I would definitely like to adapt in the future. But also, obviously, everyone would love to create their own sort of world as well. And to be honest with you, I'd like to try something that's more current, I suppose, given that Outlander's like 18th century business we're sort of dealing in. So my job involves a lot of research, historical research. So I'm always sort of learning. It's like doing a history degree, I suppose. Learning a lot about the past and how we used to live. So I suppose I'd like to write something that's more, maybe not COVID related, not quite current day, but maybe more recent than 18th century.
Yeah, so you're not worrying about getting it accurate all the time.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Okay, well, I think I've asked loads of questions, and I was just wanted to quickly ask Sarah if she felt like we'd missed anything when we've been chatting, or if she's still there. I'm not sure who's still on and who's away.
Sarah's still here.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that was brilliant, Lauren. I guess the only thing just which you've completely touched on, I suppose I'd like to reiterate, is just how important the production office is. Without the production, we've talked about this before, but without the production office, the rest of the production can't happen. And I think just to echo what you've said, Lauren, about the production office being a creative hub. Yes, it's about logistics and organisation, but it's hugely creative. And I think your career journey, which is astonishingly wonderful, I think is really that really demonstrates it, that you came in, you know, only a few years ago doing very, very practical stuff, and now you are doing very creative stuff. And I think also what I'd like to say is that, again, we've talked about this, but Lauren's journey, I think, demonstrates that through just common sense and tenacity, you can get an awfully long way. So just when you were talking, Lauren, about using what you had on your CV and then being able to talk about that in your interview, that was great. You know, so, you know, it's about actually looking at what you have got rather than what you've not done and making that work.
Yeah.
And then just being, I guess, communicative, diplomatic, hardworking, you know, not freaking out when you couldn't get the car to work on the first day, all of those kind of things, you know, good on you.
I think one thing that sets you apart from people is common sense, which sounds ridiculous, but I've definitely worked with people that don't seem to have common sense, I suppose. But common sense is a big thing. And yeah, as Sarah was saying, although production, yes, predominantly deals with logistics, I mean, you are working under the wider umbrella of a TV production or film production, and that in itself is a creative job. And as Sarah was saying, there's really no production at all without a production office. Nobody would be where they're meant to be at the right time. Scripts would not be printed. Actors wouldn't get their scripts in time. People wouldn't have a place to stay. And all these things basically add up to the production even being able to film in the first place. Once you've got your script, that's fine, but actually bringing the script to screen is basically, I wouldn't give it all the credit to production, but at the same time, maybe.
Actually, do you know, you mentioned it when you were talking about taking the trolley of food round, round to give people tea, coffees, fruit, biscuits and whatever. And actually, you know, food is at the heart of a successful production, because if people aren't being fed, you know, when they're filming or in pre-production, they get really hungry. And production, you know, if that's what, I mean, I would say that's one of the key things that production organise for the crew, to keep them happy. It's like somebody I know is on a recce is recceing at the moment for a film shoot, and it's complicated because of COVID, clearly with all the restrictions, but they were on the move yesterday for 12 hours in and out of a minibus, and had to stand under a kind of tarpaulin for 5 minutes with a sandwich, a manky sandwich, and that was kind of all the food they had for the day. Now that's yeah, I think that I can understand that it's more difficult at the moment with COVID, but I think that maybe wasn't the best way of making sure that people were working effectively.
Yeah, I think as well, it's important to highlight that when you do get your foot in the door and when you are finally working in the film and TV industry, don't be disheartened or put off by the jobs that you initially have to do, because as I said, pushing the trolley around the studio and other job like making teas and coffees, which is basically day to day for you, it's, I suppose it sort of makes you appreciate more as you go up the ladder the roles that you now get to do. But I don't think you should be put off by the fact that you have to do these jobs, because if you look at the wider picture, you might be bringing to a coffee or a lunch order to the producer who's about to go on a 3-hour meeting. And if you hadn't given them that, then they would be not hungry, you know what I mean? They wouldn't be in the best spirit for that meeting going forward. And then that meeting might go worse than it could have gone, and different things like that. So although you might feel like, oh, I'm only making a tea, I'm only making a coffee,
it's very important, Lauren. Making a cup of tea and making a cup of coffee is a bit of an art. And I remember when I did an apprenticeship, and one of the first things the guy who was mentoring me and overseeing in the John office he taught me how to make a cup of coffee properly.
Yeah,
I didn't really know, so he took about an hour out of his day to teach me, this is how we like our coffee made, this is what we want. So yeah, it's very important. Can I ask a question about the importance of asking questions, just on the kind of and the kind of way of under the context of having mentors within the workplace? I mean, how important was it for you when you first arrived to feel like you were comfortable and in a good place to ask questions, and you didn't feel like you were burdening people?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It was really especially for me coming in basically with zero experience, not zero knowledge, but really basically next to nothing to kind of go on. And as I said, actually from the beginning, from the interview, I felt relaxed by my production manager and my production coordinator purely. And again, from my experience, I think because a lot of people do start from the bottom and work their way up, people are, and especially if you are the trainee, people are willing, from my experience anyway, to answer any questions you have, and they really won't. Maybe if you ask at a busy time, they might say, I'm more than happy to answer that. Do you mind dropping me an email later and we could arrange a chat, or I'll just drop that in an email to me and I'll get back to you. So even if they can't answer you in that exact time and place, definitely people are more than happy. And myself now being a few positions like in an elevated role to when I started, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone would ever ask me as well, just purely from being in that role myself and from being a sort of beginner at one point. So yeah, I definitely think ask as many questions as you can, just make sure you're asking it at the right time. And even on a set, that was one thing that you can't learn it until you do it. You learn set etiquette. So basically knowing when I could give an iPad to a director, like, and even if the director's off by themselves, trying to work out, are they thinking about something? Like, are they coming up with the next shot or are they just kind of standing off to the side where they set up for the next shot? So, and that's really something you can only really learn on the job. But to get yourself into that place where you're learning on the job, I would definitely say, from a CV perspective, and this is just a wee tip, I would try and get your CV down to 1 page. Just given the fact that I know with the traineeships, Sarah can probably confirm, there's I'm a colossal number of people for Outlander anyway that apply. And yes, everyone looks at every CV, but I know like one kind of page that has this succinct information and they can kind of go, they can do that, they can do that, they can do that. Also, I would have, as Sarah was saying earlier, and I'd said that I really went to town on in my interview, make sure you have a skills section on your CV. Because if you don't, like myself, have a background in film and TV, and they basically know, all right, they used to work behind a bar, that means they can handle money. They used to have a job as a paperboy or girl, so they're used to getting up early, like things like that, like stuff that you would maybe not consider talking about or putting on your CV. Take like a moment to actually think, okay, what skills were involved for that, and actually you'll be surprised by how useful they can be.
So for our guys, it would be like, obviously you would have your qualifications, so you would have that skills, but you've also, if you've never worked in the industry, you've still got all the skills that you have from the part-time jobs or any work that you've done, and you've still got your soft skills as well, which we can always help you write a CV and help pad that out. That's really important. Mm-hmm.
We're actually just about to launch the next round looking for trainees, and we're also looking for people who've maybe never considered working in film and TV. So we've done a wee promo, and when you see that, I'll make sure I send that on to Alan and Kim. And when you see that, some of the trainees from last year and this year, you know, the people who've worked in bars and restaurants, somebody worked in fact, Keith, who you met, the camera trainee from last year, he worked in a NHS hospital pharmacy. So I think again, it really kind of reinforces Lauren's point about the transferable skills.
Mm-hmm.
So is this a good time then maybe to open up some questions to the students? I think I've seen a couple of things coming through the chat, but I'm sure, I'm just opening up my screen so I can see everybody. I'm sure there'll be people here who have got some questions that they would be willing to speak to Lauren face to face and ask. Has anybody got anything?
Sean, I noticed you've got something in the chat. Sean, do you want to?
Yes, let me just get the chat up. If you would, this is for Lauren, if you were to give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, it's a hard one. One piece of advice. is probably not to be put off by hard work, I suppose. I think, as I said earlier, there is a perception that film and TV is sort of, I don't mean glamorous, but I suppose there's that sort of, and I even get it to this day, if somebody, I say I'm at like back in the day we could go to a party or a pub or something and somebody says, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I work in TV, their eyes are like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's so cool. Like as if it's like this fairyland where everything's amazing. And they're like, oh my God, who have you met? And I think people think that it's just a world of kind of brushing shoulders with great actors, and which it is, I suppose, to a certain extent. But I mean, I've never been worked harder in the past. I've actually not, until COVID happened, I hadn't stopped working since I left university. So yeah, hard work, don't be put off by hard work, because it will be hard, but at the end of the day, as hard as it is, it's as rewarding as it is hard. So yeah, I hope that's a good piece of advice.
Anybody else get any questions they'd like to speak out loud?
Ian's put something in the chat. Ian, do you want to come in, or do you want me to read it out for you? Can't see him at all.
Ian's got the gas mask on.
He's basically, yes, he is. He can't speak because he's got his mask on. He's asking Lauren, how quickly did you feel like you became an important member of the crew?
Oh, that's a good one. As I said, I think at the start, when you're doing jobs like tea and coffee, and you don't have a wide knowledge of how important the runner is to a production, you can sort of feel like, oh, you go home and you're kind of like, oh, what did I do today that actually was a kind of positive part of the production as a whole. And I remember being on set, and the producer at the time walked past me when I was talking to one of the Sparks, and I'd said, I think it was just before Outlander was finishing up for season 4, and everyone's sort of asking, what are you going on to next, blah blah. And one of the Sparks had said, oh, what are you doing next? And I said, oh, I'm going on to River City. He's like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just the runner. And the producer walked past me at that very moment and turned around to me and was like, you're never just a runner, Lauren. And then sort of went in this whole spiel about how that's the most important role, and kind of reiterated what I said earlier. And that I think working in the production team is, you're kind of spoiled because you are sort of in a team and working with people that understand that you might not have eaten your lunch until 5 o'clock at night, or you might have been in the car all day and not stopped for breath. Or one time I had to go to Sports Direct in Cumbernauld and basically buy as many umbrellas as I could, and had to transport them to my car from the Sports Direct. Had to get the guy to open up every single umbrella box and pick out the navy and black umbrellas, which he wasn't happy to do. So those sort of glamorous jobs that yeah, you I think now in the position that I'm in, looking back, from day one basically, I was a key and integral member of the crew. I might not have realised that until I was kind of further down the line. But basically from day one you are.
Yeah, you can see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I've just got a quick question that just popped into my head, and it's kind of COVID related, and I think it's relevant to our students because they are going to be going out into the working environment, some of them sooner rather than later. And this is probably for Sarah as well. I mean, the runners' jobs, when it comes to now, that I've just done my COVID supervisor training as well, so I've got a bigger insight into how the different models. But is it fair to say runners' jobs are still there? It just means that you might not be able to go on set. It means that you might be running between your department and say like maybe a certain point. It doesn't mean COVID has not necessarily restricted the entry level jobs. It just means it's restricted what you might have access to, because there's certain bubbles. Is that true? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think on Outlander, you know, absolutely all the trainee roles that were planned before COVID are going ahead. I think there are very, very strict COVID rules at Wood Park Studios, and you're right. You know, so for instance, it might have been in the past where trainees might have been able to kind of integrate a bit more with each other. You know, they're very much in the painting bubble or the plastering bubble. And so that's one of my jobs, is to come up with ways of how they can all kind of meet each other and get to know each other a bit more. And certainly on the other productions that I'm working on, still having production runners, still trainee roles. You know, in fact, I got an email first thing this morning, a production still looking for runners and trainees. And what I would say is, actually, I think initially when COVID started, we thought that it would be very much restricting numbers on set, and yes, that still will be the case. So I'm an exec producer on a job, a kids drama, so I won't be going on set. Actually, I think for those people, you know, kind of helping the COVID supervisors or helping the production team or AD's team, there might end up being more flow runners or location marshals, just because of the safety COVID requirements. They need more people.
Mm-hmm. So there is jobs, guys, it's just that the roles are slightly changing, and where you can go, how you can mingle with different departments just might be slightly restricted. But that's good news for everybody here. Unlike live music and theatre, you know, the film and TV industry, people have never wanted so much content when they're sitting in their house. So there's jobs there, people.
I mean, I think for sure, Kim, and it's, you know, I think when maybe the last time we spoke about this, I was saying there's lots of production starting up. I mean, it's almost every day you're hearing about something else that's coming in. So no.
Mm-hmm. And oh, sorry, where you go, Lauren?
I was just going to say, there's lots of Facebook groups. I'll send them over to you so you can forward them on. Just that basically, I think are the best sort of to get an idea of what's going on at the moment, and people will basically kind of post, need a runner for blah, 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 need a runner driver. So there, and I've seen in recent days there are a lot of entry level positions. So I think a car, as I said earlier, might be a necessity for some, but it's definitely not restrictive to just being able to drive.
I noticed, Alan, you posted about the driving instructor, which is brilliant. And I can't remember if we talked about this before, but screen skills for bursaries for driving lessons as well. So that's definitely worth checking out, because they recognise how blinking expensive they can be and how much of a barrier to people actually paying for this can be. And screen skills. In my experience anyway, I had a car provided to me as a runner so I basically had a free car for 3 years, which was great. So usually productions will provide you with a rental car, and it's kind of, it depends on whether you're allowed to like take that home or it's just solely for the kind of day-to-day use. But definitely for Cumbernauld, that helped to getting back and forth from Glasgow.
So did everybody hear that? There's grants out there that can support you to get your driver's license. We're going to be speaking to Amy from Beck too as well, and she'll have more information about that. But just to let you know, everybody in our courses should have by now done their screen skills COVID training as well. So that these kind of little training that you do can help you get your foot in the door to be a runner, because you've made the effort to be skilled up on how, like, kind of industry standard that they're looking for in terms of safety with COVID.
Yep.
Anything else, anybody? Graham? Sorry, don't want to throw you under the bus, but you've usually got a question.
What I'll ask is, hi Lauren. Nice
Hello.
To see you. I like the idea of becoming like a locations manager. I would love the idea of going around to do recce's, you know, on locations and things. Just to ask, just off the topic here, kind of thing, is like, had you travelled around Scotland much prior to having that job? And now that you have seemed to have travelled around Scotland quite a lot, what was your favourite location? Do you have one?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I actually meant to say that I saw way more of Scotland when I was runner. I mean, I was in locations that I didn't even know existed, and also probably would never have been to had it not been for Outlander. And being the runner, I was always sort of, you have unit bases when you're shooting on location, which is basically where they have all the trailers and the cast vehicles, and usually nobody is allowed to bring a vehicle there apart from the drivers and the cast. So as runner, you kind of get that green card to be able to drive straight on, so you can collect the rushes and everything. So that was great for me to be able to see Scotland. And I mean, Outlander, if you've watched the show, we do a lot of kind of exterior shoots, and they're all around Scotland. And that's a really good thing about Outlander as well. They do utilise our kind of local environment and local locations basically, and try their best to sort of showcase what Scotland has to offer. And I mean, being the runner, I definitely saw, I mean, a lot of the time it was raining, but I did get some days that I thought there's nowhere else I would rather be right now, kind of driving up the west coast or visiting different parts of Scotland. So yeah, you definitely as a runner get to see a lot. I mean, obviously working on Outlander, which is a show that deals with that sort of greenery, that's specific to that show. Obviously, if you're maybe working in the city centre, you're getting a different panoramic view. But yeah, it's definitely an added bonus.
Because a few years ago, I took a drive to the site they filmed the Cragnaroon Stones scenes, and the back roads there were just incredible. How narrow these lanes were to try and get to that exact spot. And I thought, while I'm driving it, I'm thinking, how the hell did they get those big bloody production vans, up around these, these roads?
It's wizardry. It's definitely wizardry. I mean, usually when I get to the locations, everything's done. So I just have to imagine how they've managed to get all these big lorries and trucks, and it's definitely. But as you say, those roads are tiny. That was actually the day that I was talking about, where I had to go up to drive from the studio up to Kinlochranach, is where they filmed Stones, and collect all the keys from the caravan parks and everything. Then I had to drive back down, and then I drove back up again. So it was a long day driving.
I wouldn't mind that, actually. That sounds quite fun.
Yeah, and to be honest, because I hadn't driven in 4 years, it really brought on my driving skills, because I was having to drive every day. So, and also because I was having to adapt to different vehicles. I think the one day I had to drive a transit, is it a transit van or a big van? I only had to drive it from Ward Park Studios to the Shell garage at the end of the road. I actually couldn't even work out where the petrol bit was, because I think you have to open the front door and then it's underneath. So that's a bit of knowledge for you. It's not at the usual petrol gauge part.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Anybody else?
I think Sean's question, if you were to pick a dream production job, what would it be and why?
Ooh, do you mean like production role or actual production?
Production role.
Production role.
Yeah.
Probably my boss's role, but at the same time, the role that I do, I get to do everything that he does, just with no responsibility. So I suppose
I think I would choose your role, Lauren. I think, the one at the moment is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, so basically I get to attend pretty much all the meetings, and I'm taking notes, and I mean, some of these meetings, so tone meetings, for example, are meetings that the showrunner will have with the director. So we film Outlander in the way that we have 6 blocks. So we've got 12 episodes, so every block's 2 episodes. So for each block we'll have a new director. So every time he's meeting a new director, kind of go over the tone of the show and what he wants from this episode. And that's really interesting, seeing how, and that's really when the world of production and creativity fuse together, and you see, because you'll have the producer in the room at the same time who's saying, right, this is what's feasible, this isn't what's feasible, and then the director also kind of putting their creative content out there and what they sort of envisage different shots looking like, and what they want to bring to the show, and kind of put their own flair on each block. But yeah, I suppose I would like to be on set a little bit more, because in my current role, I'm at the studio, but I suppose when we're filming in the studio, I can go down to set whenever I want, really. This was pre-COVID. And I suppose if I had the skills, I would like to be able to do a first assistant director job or script supervisor, which is, I think script supervisor, if you know what that role is the hardest job. As I was saying earlier, when I was doing my traineeship, I had 2 days to pick 2 different departments. I wanted to just basically kind of have a taste for those departments. So I chose assistant directors and script supervisor. So the script supervisor basically makes sure that the continuity of the show and things like coffee cups, I suppose, don't end up in shot like in Game of Thrones. And the people are kind of using the same hands for different shots, and they're saying the same, if they've changed the line slightly, they're using the same line that they've been using for the past 3 shots and things like that. But you basically need to be on your game 8 hours of the day all the time. So I don't know how they're not shattered.
And I think Ben's got a question asking about what age did you realise this was a career path for you? So I suppose it's about like what age that happened at the end of uni.
Yeah, I suppose I couldn't really say that when I started in the role. I suppose it was still so new to me, and I don't think I think when I in January of 2017, when I started sort of going to the open days and bits and bobs, I suppose I couldn't 100% say I was certain that this was the career path for me, because I was still so new to it, and I hadn't actually stepped foot in a production office or on set or anything. But now I can definitely say I can't imagine working in any other industry at all. So hopefully I can continue to work in this industry, whether it be in a sort of production role or a kind of more development creative role.
Great. And Alan, have you anything you'd like to ask as well? Or?
Thanks for coming along, Lauren. That was really insightful, and I think it's great for our students to see someone who's maybe come from a background where you've maybe done something else and transitioned into this kind of area. And I suppose it shows you the kind of skills that sometimes we take for granted, all the soft skills, to be able to communicate, etc. Be in the room and knowing when not to say things. These are all very important, and this has been great to kind of to hear, straight from yourself about that.
Oh no, thank you very much for having me on. And honestly, if anyone has any further questions later down the line, just drop me an email. So I'm happy for you guys to pass on my email or anything like that.
Go on, Lauren, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Lauren, that was brilliant. Kim and Alan, are you carrying on? Will Lauren and I just leave just now?
Well, what's going to happen is Alan's going to make me host again, and I'm running a class, so only the NQ are staying on, but a lot of people are jumping off as well. So thanks very much for your time, guys.
Well, thanks for having us, and Lauren,
thanks Sarah. Thanks,
Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.